They called me evil, said my name in whispers, like it would summon spirits if they said it too loud. Celeste, they'd hiss, crossing themselves, that voodoo woman, that witch. But they didn't know a thing about me. They didn't know what I survived, what I watched, what I buried. They only saw the end of the story, ashes in the air, bodies cold in the ground, the curse no preacher could scrub clean. They never asked why, so I'll tell you now. My name is Celeste Baptiste. I was born by the bayou in Louisiana, under a blood-red moon. My mama said I came out quiet, eyes wide, looking straight through her like I'd seen something waiting on the other side. She laughed when she said it, but she wasn't joking. I always knew things I wasn't supposed to. Cool birds would land near me and stay still, just watching. I'd speak words I didn't remember learning. My dreams, well, they weren't dreams, they were warnings. Mama said the women in our line were touched, not broken. She said the gift runs through blood like a snake in tall grass, silent, beautiful, dangerous if stepped on. But a gift like that don't go unnoticed. We lived quiet in the swamps, off the path. Folks came to Mama with fevered babies, sick cows, husbands gone wandering. She always gave them something, roots, a prayer, a poultice, but she made them pay in things no man could steal. Truth, sweat, regret. I watched her hands work herbs by firelight, watched her bury bones by moonlight, watched her weep once a year, when no one saw. I asked once, what hurt her so bad? She looked me straight in the face and said, one day it'll be your turn. I didn't understand then, not until the men came. 2 traders, their boots thick with mud and breath, reeking King of Cane whiskey. I was 16. They didn't take me from Mama. They bought me. 5 silver coins and a bolt of blue cloth. Said they needed a house girl for a plantation in Alabama. Mama didn't scream, didn't fight. She just handed me a bundle, dried herbs, a string of teeth, a carved bone doll, and whispered, hide what you are, or they'll burn it out of you. I never saw her again. The road to Alabama was long, hot, and mean. I slept in wagons and dirt, ate what they tossed. The driver joked once that my eyes glowed in the dark, said he'd never seen a girl look like she knew the devil's name. I smiled. I knew more than that. When we reached Oak Hollow Plantation, I didn't cry. I just looked up at the White House, its windows like eyes, and thought, this place gonna try to eat me. But I wouldn't let it. They put me in the kitchen at first, then the laundry, then sewing. But I kept my mouth shut and my head down. Let them think I was dull, simple, that I'd forgotten my mother's words, but I hadn't. I remembered everything, every root, every spell, every chant passed down from the women who came before me. And deep in my belly I carried them like coals, not lit yet, but waiting. Then came the girl in the garden. Her name was Anya, 15, fast with a laugh, always barefoot. We weren't friends exactly, but we shared quiet looks, silent understandings. One night she didn't return from the main house. By morning she was gone. No body, no word. Just a ribbon found near the river and the mistress burning something in the fireplace. That was the first time I felt the heat rise in my throat. Not fear, not sorrow fire. The kind that don't go out once it catches. And I realized then the coals inside me weren't waiting anymore. They were waking. I didn't know how yet or when, but something was going to happen. I wasn't going to let that ribbon be the last trace of a girl who smiled with her whole face. So yeah, maybe later they called me a witch, maybe I earned it. But first I was just a girl with a mother's warnings, a stolen life, and too much knowing to stay quiet. Now you've heard the start, but the real story is what I did next. Oh, if you're still here, maybe you're the kind of soul that listens to the voices they tried to bury. Subscribe, comment, share my truth, 'cause I ain't done talking yet. When I close my eyes, I can still smell the swamp, sweet and rotting at the same time. Cypress and decay, the thick breath of it clinging to your skin like something alive. Most folks feared the bayou, said it swallowed things whole, said spirits lived in it. Mama said they were right. Oh, but not all spirits want harm, some just want to be remembered. And that's what she told me one night, when I couldn't sleep and the frogs outside were louder than thunder. I was maybe 9, scared of shadows, scared of dreams. She lit a fire, slow and low, and threw dried sage into it. The smoke curled like fingers. Watch it, she said. It dances different when it's listening, and I swear it did. That smoke twisted and turned like it had ears. Mama said the spirits liked to listen when we remembered their names. Never forget the names, she whispered. Names are power. I never did. Echo. Mama was the only person I ever saw face down a sheriff and walk away standing. One time, a deputy came through our part of the woods with a bleeding hand, begging for help. Mama took one look and said, "That's a snake bite." He told her it was from chopping wood. Said he didn't believe in swamp magic. She mixed herbs anyway. Said, "Don't believe in the roots. Believe in what they pull up." He drank the brew, near passed out from the taste, but he lived. That same man never came back, but we'd hear him tell others, "Don't mess with the Baptiste woman. Her eyes know things." He wasn't wrong. I watched everything she did. When a neighbor's baby wouldn't sleep, Mama gave her a string of dried rosemary and told her to hang it above the crib. When a man went blind after insulting his own wife, Mama sat by the river for 3 nights, talking to no one. He came back with full sight and never spoke a cruel word again. But it wasn't all spells. Sometimes it was silence. Sometimes it was listening harder than most folks knew how. And sometimes it was warning. There was a woman named Lyra who lived a few miles out. Her husband beat her so bad she could barely walk to our door. Mama didn't curse him, no. She gave Lyra a bag of black dirt and said, "Put it under your bed. Leave the door open." 3 days later, that man stepped on a copperhead snake right in his kitchen. Did she summon the snake? Maybe. Maybe not, but Mama always said, "The earth listens if you speak true." I remember asking her once, "What if the earth don't want to help?" She looked at me hard. That's when you reminded who you are. By the time I was 12, I knew the taste of root bark, the sting of nettle, and the smell of death before it came. I'd seen old women cry when Mama touched their shoulders. I'd seen fires flicker when she walked past. Some of the other children wouldn't play with me. Said I looked at them wrong. One even said I had devil eyes. Mama told me to let them talk. Better they fear you than forget you. I held that close, because deep down, I started to feel something growing in me too. Not just memory, not just knowledge. Something alive. When I'd whisper to animals, they listened. When I dreamed of someone, they'd show up the next day. Once, I touched a dead squirrel and it gasped once before going still again. Mama saw all that. Never scolded me. Just said, "Be careful what you wake up, child." But when I asked her what she meant, she only said, "Some spirits come when you call. Some come because they were waiting." I didn't know then that the world would tear me away from her, that Alabama would break my name off my tongue and throw me into a house that smelled of soap and cruelty. But I knew what I carried. I knew how the swamp whispered and watched, how smoke dances when spirits lean close. I knew how to listen between the lines of a prayer, how to hear a threat hiding in kindness. The world didn't want girls like me. It wanted silence, obedience. But what I had, what Mama gave me, was something they couldn't unteach or unbeat or unsell. It was mine. And one day, when the fire came, when the blood soaked through the wood floors, and the screams reached the night sky, they'd all remember the smoke had been listening the whole time. "You still with me?" Then you hear it too. The truth hiding in the hush. Subscribe, leave your words below, and share my voice. More's coming. You don't want to miss what happens next. I wasn't taken, I was bought, like salt, like sugar, like a thing to be measured and sold. 5 coins on a wooden table, that's what my life weighed to them. I remember the day clear as anything. The sun was too bright, too clean for what was happening. My hands were tied, but not tight. They didn't think I'd run. I didn't. Where would I go? Mama stood behind them, her jaw tight, her hands clenched around something I couldn't see. "Don't cry," she said low, not to me, but to herself. "Don't let them see your tears." No, I didn't cry either. I just stared at the man who held the coins. Greasy hair, a lip chewed raw like he had secrets caught in his teeth. He looked at me like I was meat. Then he laughed and said, "She'll fetch fine laundry." I wasn't laundry. I wasn't fine. I was flame under wet cloth. The road to Alabama stretched longer than it should have. Dust caked my mouth, and the cart creaked like it resented its load. I sat between sacks of rice and rope. Sometimes the driver would hum hymns. Sometimes he'd just talk like I wasn't there. Said folks in Alabama were different. Said they didn't like talky ones. Said I'd better learn to keep my head down, or I'd end up like the last one. He didn't say what happened to the last one. Didn't need to. When we reached Oak Hollow Plantation, I knew the place was sick. You ever feel a place breathing? Like the ground itself knows pain? That's what it felt like. The trees were twisted, leaning too far in. The air hung heavy, not just with heat, but with knowing, like it had seen things, like it remembered screams. The big house sat white and proud at the top of the rise, but it looked like a lie, something pretending to be beautiful, while rotting inside. And standing in front of it, arms crossed, was a man with a face too smooth and eyes too sharp. "Oh, the master. Name?" he asked. "Celeste," I answered. He sneered. "Too fancy. You'll be called Letty now, Letty, like a stain on a clean cloth." That's what he made me. The house was loud and silent all at once. Bells ringing, feet stomping, orders flying. But the silence lived beneath it, deep and buried, the kind that comes when people stop believing in being saved. They threw me in the kitchen at first. The cook, Miss Glory, was kind but worn. Said if I moved fast and didn't talk back, I'd lost. Told me to stay out of the mistress's sight. She don't like new girls with eyes like yours. What kind of eyes I got? I asked. "The kind that remember," she said. "They don't want you remembering here." I did my work quiet, careful, but I watched. The overseer, Mr. Crane, was a snake in boots. Always smiling, always watching. He'd touch a girl's back too long, lean too close when no one was looking. But I always saw the mistress, pale and jittery, drank from a silver flask by noon each day. She never spoke my name, just snapped her fingers when she needed me. The master? He only saw 2 things, land and power, and we were just tools to keep both running smooth. They thought I was harmless, but I remembered Mama's words, "Hide what you are, or they'll burn it out of you," so I hid. Until the night I found the bundle. It was tucked under the porch steps, a cloth bundle wrapped tight with twine. Inside, dried flowers, black feathers, and a small wooden carving of a woman with her eyes scratched out. It wasn't mine, but it was meant for me. Someone knew, someone remembered, and they were waiting. That night, I dreamed of Mama. She stood in the swamp again, holding a candle that never blew out. Her voice came like wind through trees. "He will take from you, but you will take more." I woke with that in my chest. Didn't know what it meant yet, but I would. If you're hearing this, you're hearing what they tried to bury. Don't let them rewrite my story. Subscribe, drop a comment, share this voice they thought they silenced. The river near Oak Hollow didn't run like the one back home. It wasn't wild, didn't sing to the trees. It was slow, heavy, like it was dragging secrets behind it. I'd go there whenever I could steal a moment, not to wash, not to rest, but to remember. To feel like myself, even for a minute. I'd close my eyes and pretend the water was swamp warm and Mama's voice was just behind me, humming some old song to keep the spirits calm. But that river never gave peace. It gave omens. The first came with the frogs, hundreds of them. all croaking at once, loud, urgent, angry. It started at dusk. By midnight, the noise was deafening. Some said it was just the season, but I knew better. Animals feel pain before it comes. And something was coming. I saw her again, Ania. She was alive. Not as a ghost, not a memory. Flesh and blood. Scrubbing linens behind the shed with hands too small and eyes too wide. She looked straight at me and didn't speak. Her lip was busted, her left cheek swollen. She didn't need to speak. The mistress had sent her to the master's quarters 2 nights before. Said she was looking scruffy the next morning and put her back to work outside as punishment. Punishment for what? Yo for breathing, yo for surviving, yo for crying. Yo, I asked Miss Gloria about it, careful not to seem too curious. Well, she just said, some things you don't name unless you want to wear 'em yourself. And then she walked away. No, but I couldn't walk away, not after what I saw that morning by the river. Blood. A streak of it, bright red, soaking into the sand like the earth was drinking it. No body, no scream, just the stain and one torn sandal left behind. And the frogs gone silent. I didn't say a word to anyone, but something in me broke open. It was like a drumbeat started in my chest. Not fear, not rage, not yet, something older. Something waiting to rise. That night, I lit a candle in the pantry after everyone had gone to sleep, pressed my palm to the dirt floor and whispered every name I'd ever been told. Women from Mama's line, names carved into bone and whispered to fire. Names not meant to be spoken above ground. I asked them to watch me, to guide me, to give me strength. Not just to endure, but to act. Because I wasn't going to survive Oak Hollow. I was going to haunt it. The next day, the master's dog bit a boy named Caleb, bad enough to leave a scar across his calf. The boy wasn't doing anything, just standing too close to the porch. The master said he'd learn to stay in his place now. That night, the dog howled until morning. No one could sleep. Some swore they saw shadows moving near the well. Me? I just listened to the howls and smiled. Sometimes spirits answer slow. Sometimes they answer loud. I started collecting dried nettle, rusty nails, twine from the chicken yard, bits of glass, pieces of black cloth. Not enough to draw attention, but enough to shape the old ways. Quiet spells, binding knots, smoke signs. And I started watching the mistress closer. She twitched when alone. She talked to mirrors. Once, I found her muttering over the master's boots, pouring powder into them from a silver vial. She was doing her own work, only hers was selfish. Hers was built on control, power, greed. Mine? Mine was built on memory, on grief and grief. It builds sharp tools when you sharpen it long enough. Cocks up the ropes pop restray. Then came the night. I saw the river churn. It wasn't raining. No wind. No fish stirring. But the river moved like something was fighting beneath it, boiling, writhing, ray live. And I heard Mama's voice again, clear, steady. He will take from you, but you will take more. I didn't understand the more yet, but I would soon. Duptural CTA voiceover friendly. Still with me? Then you feel it too, that tight grip in your chest that says something's coming. Don't look away. Subscribe, comment your thoughts, and pass this story on. The river ain't done speaking. They say you can tell a person's truth by their eyes. But I learned the hard way. That ain't always true. The mistress, she had glassy blue eyes that sparkled like river stones in the morning sun. Pretty to look at, easy to trust, but behind that sparkle there was ice. Thin, sharp, and waiting to crack under the weight of anything real. She smiled all the time, too wide, too bright, and that smile, it meant something different every day. Sometimes it meant she'd been drinking since sunrise. Sometimes it meant someone was going to bleed before supper. I first saw her break when her youngest daughter, little Evangeline, cut her hand on a splinter, the girl cried. Nothing bad, just a nick. But the mistress froze, her whole face drained of color. You. She knelt down slowly, wrapped the child's hand in silk, and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then she turned, slapped the maid standing nearby. So hard, the girl dropped the water pail and said, "You brought that splinter into my home." It didn't make sense, but pain doesn't have to, especially not when it lives behind a perfect smile. And she started calling for me more often. Letty, she'd sing down the hallway, like my name was a lullaby. Bring my tonic. I'd carry it, bitter stuff in a glass bottle, and watch her fingers tremble as she poured it. Once, she spilled it on the table and screamed like the world was ending. Another time, she pulled me close and whispered, "You remind me of someone I buried." Then she laughed like it was a joke. Only her eyes weren't laughing. I told Miss Gloria about it quietly, careful not to sound worried. She just wiped her hands on her apron and said, "That woman got ghosts chasing her shadow. Best you not get caught in the crosswind." But I was already caught. The mistress started asking me to do strange things. Night, bring her herbs from the garden, but only the ones that hadn't bloomed. Pick the youngest eggs, only the ones laid before dawn, wipe down the floors with salt water, twice. One night, she handed me a jar of ash and told me to sprinkle it under her bed. To keep the dreams out, she said. I did it, but I kept a pinch of the ash in my pocket. Something told me I'd need it later, and I was right. A week later, the master beat Anya again, this time out in the open. No secrecy, no shame, just rage and rope. He claimed she stole sugar, but we all knew better. She didn't cry, didn't scream. She just looked past him, eyes blank, like she wasn't in her body anymore. That night I saw the mistress standing in the moonlight, watching it happen from the upstairs window. She didn't flinch, didn't turn away. She smiled, that same smile, the one with the fire hiding underneath. That's when I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. The master didn't act alone. No, he was cruel. Yes, but she fed it, directed it, sharpened it. She didn't stop the pain, she orchestrated it. And she used her smile like a curtain to hide the stage. I started keeping a pouch under my dress, frilled it with little things, a chicken bone carved with a cross, a shred of blue ribbon from Evangeline's dropped doll, ash from the mistress's room, a dead moth caught in the pantry window. Every piece had meaning, every piece connected to her. Because if she was going to keep smiling while the house burned around us, I was going to make sure she saw the flames coming and felt them. One night, while scrubbing the floor in the dining room, I overheard her talking to a man. Someone I didn't know. Her voice was low, urgent. "I can't take it anymore," she said. "It's like the house is turning against me." The man said something back, too quiet to catch. Then she whispered, "The girl, Letty. She walks like she owns the air." That's when I knew. She feared me. Not because of what I'd done, but because of what I might become. And fear, fear is power. If you hold it right, you still listening? Then you know. The smile was never just a smile. It was a warning. Stay close, subscribe, comment what you're feeling, and share this story because the fire, it's just getting started. They said the garden used to grow roses, but when I came, it only grew thorns. The beds were dry, patches of cracked dirt, snaking between the weeds like veins. The flowers that bloomed were strange things, white petals with red specks, vines that twisted into knots, and leaves that stung if you touched them too long. The mistress still made us tend it. Every morning before the sun got cruel, I'd go out with a tin pail and clippers, trimming, watering, whispering under my breath like Mama taught me. Because gardens listen, even dead ones. One morning, while loosening the soil near the base of a sickly rose bush, I hit something hard. Thought it was a root at first, but when I dug deeper, I uncovered something small, round, wrapped in muslin, a doll. Not like the ones Evangeline carried. This one was old, handmade, black cloth face, no eyes, a red thread mouth sewn shut. His dress was torn, and one of its arms had been stuffed with dried rosemary and what smelled like graveyard dirt. Someone had buried it on purpose, and someone didn't want it found. I didn't take it inside, and I tucked it in my apron and walked slow down to the shed. Closed the door, unwrapped it again under dim light. There was a name stitched into the hem of the dress. Hannah. I didn't know any Hannah, but I felt her. Cold, soft, sudden, like someone brushing past your shoulder without touching you. Like the breath of a ghost. "Oh," I whispered, "who hurt you?" "Oh," and I swear, the thread mouth twitched. That night, the wind picked up, hard, slamming shutters, howling through cracks. The oak trees bent low, and one even snapped clean in two. Miss Glory crossed herself, said it was a sign, but I already knew someone was waking up. I placed the doll under my pillow, didn't tell nobody, but I started seeing things in dreams. Faces I'd never met, places I'd never been. A woman standing barefoot in a cotton field, screaming without sound. A man's hand stained red, trembling. A fire rising. A song without words. Each night, it grew stronger. Each morning, I felt different, lighter, quicker, sharper, like I was carrying more than just myself. I asked Miss Glory if anyone named Hannah ever lived here. She froze, said, "Where'd you hear that name?" I lied. Heard someone say it in a dream. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Don't chase her shadow, child. That girl disappeared. Ain't no good comes from digging where the house wants you to forget." But I wasn't digging. I was remembering. There's a difference. The next morning, I found a ribbon tied to the garden gate. Blue. Faded. Same shade as the scrap I'd taken from Evangeline's doll weeks ago. Except this one wasn't hers. This one was stiff with dried blood. I walked to the garden, slow, careful. Buried the Hannah doll again, but this time I added my own piece, a lock of my hair. A chicken bone carved with a moon, salt, and ash. When I covered it with soil, I said, "Let her speak." Then I turned and walked away. That night, Evangeline woke screaming. The whole house jumped. Your mistress ran to her room, frantic. I followed at a distance. The girl sat straight up in bed, sweat soaking her gown, eyes wide but unfocused. She was in the garden, she said over and over. She was in the garden. She was in the garden. Ooh, mistress shook her. Who was in the garden? Ooh, and the girl whispered. She said her name was Hannah. Mistress turned and saw me in the doorway. She didn't say a word, but her hand clutched that silver cross on her chest, like it might burn her from the inside. Still here? Then you see it too. The garden wasn't dead. It was remembering. And buried things don't like to stay quiet forever. Hit subscribe, share this story, and drop a comment if you've ever felt the chill of something that wasn't supposed to return. The night it started, I woke up choking. Not from smoke, not from sickness. Just air that felt too thick, like something invisible, pressing down on my chest. The room was still, too still. Even the crickets had gone silent. I sat up, heart thudding, and that's when I heard it. I knock, not loud, not rushed. No, just one soft tap on the pantry door, then silence, then another and another. I counted them. 1, 2, 3. 13 knocks, all exactly the same, even. Cold, measured, like whoever was on the other side knew I was listening. I didn't open the door, didn't move. Just whispered a prayer. Mama used to say when something came walking through the swamp at night. I thought maybe it was a dream until the next night. It happened again. And the night after that, the 13 knocks. Always just past midnight, always the same rhythm. On the 4th night, I pressed my ear to the wood. Held my breath, no wind, no footsteps, just that steady beat. Knock, 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 and behind it, a whisper I couldn't make out, like someone was trying to speak through the wood itself. I asked Miss Glory if the pantry door ever creaked open at night. She stiffened, said, "Best not to count knocks, child. Counting gives them power." Then she handed me a small pouch of herbs, told me to keep it on me, didn't say what it was, didn't need to. You know, the air already told me whatever was knocking wasn't from this side. That night I stayed awake, held a candle, sat by the pantry. When the knocks came again, slow, patient, I did something I hadn't dared before. I whispered back. Ro said, I hear you, and the knocking stopped, not faded. Stopped. Just like that. Then the whisper came clearer than ever. One word, hollow. Hollow. It wasn't a threat. It was a memory. And somehow I knew this wasn't just about me, wasn't just about Hannah. It was about the house. Oak Hollow. The name wasn't just pretty. It was literal. This place was hollowed out, scooped clean by cruelty, burned hollow by silence, and haunted not by ghosts, but by what had been stolen and buried and left to rot. I started sleeping with salt at every door. Ash around my bed, coat the doll wrapped in muslin beneath my pillow again. One evening, the mistress looked at me longer than usual. Oh, she said, the walls have started groaning again. I just nodded. She asked, do you hear it too? I said, every night. She laughed, nervous. Must be the wood settling. But we both knew it wasn't. Settling doesn't come with 13 knocks after midnight. The younger slaves started whispering stories. One said he saw a shadow crawl across the ceiling without casting one on the floor. Another swore where no one walked and changed while Miss Glory just hummed under her breath, stirring the stew a little faster each night. Nobody dared talk too loud. Because once a house starts listening, you learn to speak soft. Then one night I knocked back. 13 knocks. Slow, firm. One for each night I'd been haunted. I didn't expect a response, but I got one. The pantry door creaked open. On its own, no wind, no footsteps. Just air colder than winter and the smell of river water and smoke. Inside, nothing moved. But when I stepped in, I saw it, a faint mark in the dust on the floor. A circle. And in the middle, a handprint small, burned into the wood like it had been seared by heat or grief or both. I dropped to my knees, placed my palm over it, and I felt it, like a pulse. Like someone had been waiting for me to arrive, not to scare me, but to finish something left undone. You still here? Then some doors aren't meant to stay closed forever. If you feel that pull in your chest, the knock that never stops, hit subscribe, share this story, and drop a comment, because the house, it's not done talking yet. The morning after the pantry opened, nothing looked different. The sun rose, the crows cried. The master yelled at someone out back. But I knew something had shifted. The wind carried it. The ground carried it. And when I walked past the mistress in the hallway, she stopped. Not because I said anything, just because she stared at me like she was seeing someone who'd already left, like a ghost of something she'd done wrong. Then she said, you smell like ashes. I just smiled and kept walking. The next few days felt twisted, like the house was trying to untangle its own tongue. Doors opened without sound. The sugar in the pantry turned bitter. Salt went missing. 3 chickens dropped dead in their coop without a scratch on them. Miss Glory said, something's been stirred. I know, and I knew what she meant. That night, I stood by the kitchen table with the doll and the pouch. Added 2 things, a cube of sugar stolen from the mistress's tea tray, and a handful of salt from the cook's barrel, 1 sweet, 1 sharp, 2 faces of the same spell. Because that's what the house had become, a spell, woven with names no one spoke, built with bones no one buried. I whispered, Hannah, if you can still hear me, show me what they took. The candle beside me flickered so hard the flame went sideways, then stilled. That night I dreamed of blood on white linens, of hands pressing down on a child's face, of laughter twisted and wrong, and of a voice, raspy and distant, saying, she took the sugar. She must be punished. When I woke up, I was crying, but I wasn't afraid. I was furious. I went out to the garden, past the twisted vines and the half-dead flowers, dug where I buried the doll. But it wasn't there. Instead, in its place, was a spoon, silver, bent, burned at the tip. And on the handle, the name Hannah scratched in with something sharp. I took it as a sign, not a warning. A gift. Inside, the mistress had fallen sick. Couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, kept clutching her throat like something was stuck inside it. She started accusing everyone, said her tea was poisoned, said someone was feeding her dirt in the bread, said the walls were breathing. The master said she was losing her mind. He locked her in her room with a servant to watch her. But I didn't need to go near her to see what was happening. She was tasting everything she'd tried to bury, and it tasted like ash. Oh, that night I saw a trail of salt leading from the kitchen to the pantry. No one else noticed. I followed it, 13 grains in a perfect line at the end, a small piece of honeycomb wrapped in cloth, sweet on the outside, sticky and rotten underneath, just like her. I added it to my pouch, said a prayer. Not for peace, for justice. The next morning, the servant who'd been watching the mistress ran out screaming. Said she saw the lady levitate, said her eyes rolled back, said she spoke in a voice that wasn't hers. The master didn't believe her, but I did, because I knew what had been buried. I knew what had been stirred. And I knew what was coming next. If you've stayed this far, you're starting to taste it too. The bitter and the sweet. Sugar can rot, salt can heal, and stories like this, they need to be told. So, subscribe, comment what you think the honeycomb meant, and share this story. Because the house ain't done speaking, and neither am I. I never saw it with my eyes, but I heard it slithering through the walls like silk on wood. Slow, smooth, patient. It started after the honeycomb. Little things at first, a knock here, a hiss is there. Then the sound of something heavy dragging itself behind the fireplace at night. Miss Glory said it was rats. But I knew rats didn't breathe like that. One night, I put my ear against the wall beside the pantry. The wood was warm, too warm, like something alive had pressed against it not long before. And then I heard it, faint but clear, a long, slow whisper. Not words, just a sound. Like scales moving over stone. Next morning, I found white powder sprinkled in the corners of the kitchen. Miss Glory had been doing it. Snake dust, she whispered, eyes not meeting mine. To keep the watchers from crawling too close. Watchers? What? Not spirits, not ghosts. Watchers. Ohms that didn't float in the air, but curled through your home, listening, waiting. The mistress screamed again that night, woke the whole house. Said she saw a man with no face sitting at the foot of her bed. Said his mouth opened wide like a snake's and something black poured out. The master said she was cursed. He brought in a preacher, but the preacher didn't last the night. He left before sunrise, muttering something about things too old for scripture. The next evening, Evangeline found a skin on her windowsill. Not a dress, a snake skin, perfect. Long, still wet. She screamed and dropped it. I picked it up, held it in both hands. It was warm and pulsing. That night, I went to the pantry again, held the doll, whispered my truth. I ain't afraid of you. And from the other side of the wall, I heard a single knock, then a long hiss, then laughter. Low and human and wrong. The next morning, I went out to the woods behind the garden, where the ground grew soft, where things were buried. I dug with bare hands until my fingers bled. Found bones. Not old, small, and a scrap of cloth still stained with blood. Pink gingham, same fabric. Evangeline wore last summer. I never asked. I didn't need to. Some things speak louder in silence. I placed the bones in a small box, wrapped the cloth around them, and carried them back to the pantry. Set it on the floor, lit 3 candles, one for the girl, one for the truth, and one for the snake I said. Come see what you left behind. The wall shuddered. Dust fell. And for a moment, the room smelled like burning hair and sweet tea. That night the snake came through the walls again, but it didn't slither. It knocked 13 times. Same as before, and this time I opened the door. The pantry was empty, but on the floor, a trail of salt leading into the dark, still here. Then you feel it now. The watchers. The weight. The thing slithering just out of sight. Protects don't protect, they trap. And some stories ain't just told, they're whispered through the cracks. If this story's got under your skin, don't let it go quiet. Subscribe or share it with someone who listens to knocks at night. And tell me in the comments, what would you do if the walls started breathing? I stopped looking in mirrors after that week, not because I feared my face, but because I feared what might be standing behind it. There was one in the hallway upstairs, an old warped glass in a brass frame, stained with time and stories. No one ever spoke aloud. Ew. Miss Glory called it the Watcher's Eye. Miss Glory called it the Watcher's Eye, said it saw more than your reflection. You said it showed who you really were, if you stared long enough. One afternoon I passed by it on the way to fetch linens for the mistress. The glass flickered, not from sunlight. Something behind me moved. But when I turned, the hall was empty. Except it wasn't, because when I looked back, my reflection smiled. But I hadn't. I dropped the linens, ran. Didn't look back again for hours. Ew. That night, Miss Glory gave me a bit of charcoal to keep under my tongue and told me that mirror don't reflect. It remembers, I asked. Remembers what? She said, every face that's been lied to. The next day, the master's daughter, Sarah, wouldn't stop screaming, said her doll came to life. Said it stood at the foot of her bed and told her secrets in her own voice. I found her curled in a corner, eyes wide, clutching the doll with both hands. I knew that look. That was the look of someone who saw truth too early. That night, the mistress broke the mirror. Said she saw her mother in it, drowning. Said she hadn't dreamt of that woman in years. The shards fell all over the hallway, bloodied her hand. And as she screamed, I saw something in the largest shard. A girl, brown-skinned, burned on one arm, staring back at me with hollow eyes. She mouthed one word, Celeste, my name. I picked up the shard when no one was looking, wrapped it in cloth, hid it under my cot. That night I dreamt of a field, fog thick and blue. In the middle, a mirror, freestanding, no frame, just glass. And in it faces, not mine, faces of girls, of women. Some with their mouths sewn shut, others crying blood. One smiling so wide her teeth were cracked, and behind them the overseer, smiling. I woke with my pillow wet from sweat and tears, but I didn't feel broken. I felt chosen. The mirror had shown me what was buried. Now it was my job to speak what others wouldn't. That morning, I left the shard under the mistress's pillow. By evening, she had locked herself in her room. Wouldn't speak, wouldn't eat, wouldn't even scream anymore. Just stared at the wall, lips moving like she was praying or confessing. The master didn't ask questions. He just drank more and yelled more, but even he avoided the hallway with the mirror shards now. Nobody swept them. It was like the house wanted to keep them there, as reminders or warnings. That night I lit a candle, placed it in front of a piece of the mirror I kept. And whispered, show me who still hides. The flame bent sideways, and in the glass I saw a girl, Ying, no older than 8, she mouthed, the cellar, then vanished. If you've followed this far, maybe you've seen your own reflection blink. Maybe you've heard your name whispered in silence. Mirrors don't just show what's in front, they show what's buried behind. So subscribe. Share this with someone who feels watched in empty rooms, and leave a comment. Would you look in that mirror again? There was a door behind the pantry, old, swollen with age, painted shut maybe years ago. Folks said it didn't open, but the mirror shard had whispered, and I had listened. The cellar was waiting. No, and I was done waiting. I waited until deep night, when even the crows stopped calling, took the shard from under my cot, wrapped it tight, and slipped past the sleeping quarters. The door creaked when I touched it, like it hadn't been touched by skin in generations. But it didn't resist me. It opened, easy, like it had been waiting too. The stairs groaned with every step. Dampness clung to the walls. Stone slick with memories. I held the candle low. Saw scratch marks along the brick, not animal, fingernails. Halfway down, I heard breathing, not mine. Slow, measured, wet. I whispered, I ain't afraid of you. The breathing paused then. Laughter, low, close. I held the shard tighter and kept walking. The bottom opened into a narrow room, no windows, just shelves of jars. Some filled with ash, some with yellowed teeth, some I couldn't name, and in the middle, a wooden chair. Bolted to the floor, chains hanging from the arms, blood soaked into the seat, black with age. I should have run, but I didn't, because in the corner I saw her, a figure hunched low, shadowy, still, long hair draped over her face like moss. She lifted her head, her eyes were hollow. Her skin shimmered like smoke, and when she spoke, her voice wasn't hers. It was mine. Why did you leave me? I dropped to my knees, whispered, I didn't know. She stood slowly, bones cracking. And behind her, others appeared, children, women, even a man with no mouth. All silent, all watching. You, I said, tell me what to do. The girl with my voice stepped forward, pressed her hand to my chest. You whispered, speak our names. That's when I saw them, carved into the beams, hundreds of names, some scratched in blood. Some burned deep. One caught my breath, Celeste age. Sure, I hadn't written it, but someone had, and they knew me. I whispered every name I could see, whispered until my throat went raw. I know. Until the candle melted to nothing, until the air buzzed with the sound of voices rising from dirt, from walls, from jars. Then I heard the footsteps upstairs, heavy, fast, the door above flung open. The master's voice, who's down there? He stormed in, and the candle sparked back to life. No? He looked at the room, at the jars, at the names, and his face drained. I know, you weren't supposed to, he said. You weren't supposed to see this, I said, but I did. He reached for me. But the chains on the chair flew up on their own, snapped around his wrists, he screamed. Nyote tried to pull free, but the cellar had decided, and it wasn't letting him go. I stood back, watched as the spirit circled him. The girl with my voice leaned in close to his ear. And for the first time, he looked scared. I walked out without looking back. The cellar door closed behind me, and this time it locked, all on its own. Some doors aren't meant to be opened. But once they are, you can't unsee what's been hidden. If this part of the story shook you, subscribe now, comment what you think was in those jars, and share this with someone who's brave enough to open doors they're told to ignore. The day after the cellar door locked itself, a stranger came to the plantation. He didn't knock, didn't wait at the edge of the gate, like most guests. He just walked straight in, boots dusty, coat black, hat low over his eyes. The crows followed him. That's how I knew he wasn't here for business. He was here for balance. Miss Glory saw him first. Her hand shook when she brought me the message. He wants to speak with the girl. I didn't ask who he was. I already knew. He was waiting in the parlor. Didn't stand when I entered. He didn't smile. His eyes were clouded gray, like ash after fire. On the table in front of him, a single object, a brass ring with 3 snake heads biting their own tails. He said, you opened the door, not a question, a statement. I nodded. He said, and the house hasn't bled yet? I didn't answer that one. He already knew too. He took off his glove. His hand was burned. Old scars, like someone had tried to brand him. But the fire changed its mind halfway through. He tapped the table once and said, "They sent me from Charleston. Too many mouths whispering, too many names stirring." Then he leaned in, real close, voice low. "But I'm not here to stop you, girl. I'm here to see how far you'll go." I didn't blink, didn't flinch. He smiled, not kind. Then reached into his coat and pulled out a small pouch. Inside, salt, ashet, and a folded paper soaked in something that smelled like rust and sugar. "This," he said, "is what she left for you." I opened the paper. A single line, written in brown ink. He fears the fire, the water. Remembers. No name. Oh, but I didn't need one. I knew it was from her. He stood, picked up his ring, slipped it on, and just before walking out the door, he said, "There's more buried here than bones, girl. You're not done, not yet." And just like that, he was gone. No carriage, no footsteps. Just the sound of the crows circling twice, then flying off. That night, I couldn't sleep. You kept turning those words over in my head. He fears the fire, the water, remembers. I whispered them over the mirror shard, over the cellar floor, and the air thickened, the walls cracked. Like the house itself was listening. By dawn, the master hadn't come out of his quarters. The mistress was humming to herself. Some song I'd never heard, over and over. Miss Glory had disappeared. Just her shoes left by the back door, but the girl with my voice, she came back in the mirror. In the smoke from the fire, sometimes even in puddles on the kitchen floor. Always watching, always waiting. "Ooh," I asked her, "what comes next?" "Ooh." She pressed a finger to her lips, then pointed upward. "The attic." I'd never been allowed up there, no one had, but the stairs weren't locked anymore, not after the visitor. They creaked like they hadn't been touched in decades, dust thick like snow. And at the top, an iron trunk, chained shut, but the chains had rusted through. I lifted the lid. Inside, dolls, dozens of them, black, burned, eyeless, each one with a name stitched into its dress. And at the very bottom, one with my name, Celeste. I didn't scream, didn't cry. I just picked her up, held her close, and whispered, "We're not done yet." And she blinked. Once, slow, deliberate, and from the hallway below I heard the sound of firewood cracking. But there was no fire, not yet. He came from Charleston, but he didn't bring salvation, just questions, old dolls, new warnings, and the promise that this story still had teeth. If you're feeling the heat rise with me, subscribe now. Drop a comment. What would you do if the doll had your name? And share this with someone who knows. Fire remembers what we forget. I carried the doll back down the attic stairs like it was a torch or a weapon. She didn't blink again. Didn't speak, but I felt her heartbeat against my palm. It matched mine. The house was silent, not quiet, silent. The kind that wraps around your throat, tight and thick. Miss Glory was still gone. The mistress? Still humming. And the master? Not in the parlor, not in his study. No, not even in the room where he kept the keys. But I felt him like a bad scent in the walls. Like heat behind locked doors. The house knew, the doll knew. So I followed them. The mirror in the hall had reformed, somehow, whole, polished, and in its glass I saw the girl again. The one with my voice, but this time she was holding something. A small oil lamp. And when she raised it, I smelled smoke. I ran, not away, toward it, toward the cellar, because I finally understood. The fire wasn't a curse. It was a cleansing. The cellar door opened before I reached it. Inside, the chair was gone, the jaws smashed. The names burning on the walls one by one, like they were being set free. And at the far end, standing in the same spot where I first saw her, the girl, now glowing faintly orange like embered coal, and beside her the master, tied, mouth open, but no sound came out. I stepped in, Joel in one hand, Shard in the other. He tried to move, to beg with his eyes. Oh, but the house had stopped listening to him. Now it listened to me, I whispered. You hurt too many. Hid too much, buried too deep. He shook his head, but the girl just smiled. She said, I light it. I set the doll down gently, placed the shard beside her, then picked up the oil lamp from the floor. It was already burning, had been waiting, just like everything else. One spark. That's all it took. The walls caught first, then the ceiling, but the fire wasn't wild. It was patient, intentional, as if it knew exactly what it wanted to consume and what it wanted to spare. The spirits didn't scream. They sang, low, unified, a song without words. But I knew what it meant. Freedom. Oh, I walked out the front door, alone, but not alone, because I could feel them behind me. All of them. Finally walking free. The house burned through the night. No one came to stop it. By morning it was nothing but ash and bones. And in the middle of it all, the mirror. Unbroken. No, still whole, reflecting nothing but sky. They asked me later if I had seen what happened. If I knew where the master went, I said I didn't. They believed me. Oh, because what else could a girl like me say? But when I walked past the ruins the next week, where the cellar used to be, the earth was smooth, untouched, like it had never been dug, like it had never existed, except I knew better. And so did the fire. I kept the shard, wore it around my neck, bound in leather, and every now and then when I pass a mirror and catch a flicker of something, I nod, because I know she's still with me, watching, waiting, making sure no one forgets, because some stories don't end. They burn forever, in silence, in blood, and in flame. Oh, if you've made it here, then this fire has touched you too. Don't let it die quietly. Subscribe to the channel, comment what you saw in your own reflection, and share this story. So her name and her fire burn on.